Hey, Super Dave here for Bleeding Edge interviews. You may be familiar with me from my interviews in podcast form, or maybe you've listened to Toxic Radio from time to time and caught Bleeding Edge or Brain Salad Sunday. Well, here I am bringing to you the inaugural video edition of Bleeding Edge interviews. Giving this a go, do all my interviews via Zoom meetings and chat and video chat, all that kind of stuff anyway. So, hey, figure what the heck? Why not publish it in video form as well as audio form for those that want to watch it this way and be able to see the friendly faces I'm talking to while I'm talking to them, or at least when I did talk to them. Hey, some of this stuff may be live someday as well. Just keep in mind, work in progress here. There are some elements of this that are placeholders, there are some that are pretty well finalized. So I am open to and interested in constructive feedback. So please be nice. Don't beat me up. I know I don't have a face for video. It's fine. We'll be okay. Meanwhile, give me your constructive feedback. Let me know your thoughts in the chat below. Going to be some links down there for you as well, so you can find the other podcast versions of my previous interviews. I've got more in the pipeline, so this will be the first of several. And from here, we'll make it a regular thing. But let me know what your thoughts are. See how it goes. Keep me posted. Meanwhile, speaking of that, you're going to get to hear going to get to see, correct myself already. You're going to get to see my very first edition with Mark Gatland and Malcolm Galloway of Hats Off Gentlemen, It's Adequate. Friendly chaps, they were kind enough and brave enough to be the first ones to be part of my video edition of the podcast. So without further ado, here is Mark Gatland and Malcolm Galloway of Hats Off Gentlemen, It's Adequate.
Hey, we're on. Hello, thanks very much for your interest and your support. We greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining me, guys. I appreciate your time as well. It's guys, and I got to admit, Hats Off Gentlemen, It's Adequate, which I would say can be a drinking game to see how many times I trip up saying it. So I'm going to minimize my use of it if I can, so I don't kill anybody with alcohol poisoning later on. But, I want to say you guys are for me admittedly a recent discovery. And despite my constant exploration and interest in all things progressive, somehow I was slow on the uptake. So I apologize for being late to the party, but I'm so glad I discovered it.
Not at all. Not at all. There's a lot of bands out there to discover. So
Yeah, indeed. Now let me get myself straight too. So because I think even though I looked at the pictures, I don't think I was clear who was who. So help me identify Malcolm versus Mark.
Malcolm, Mark.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Just in case later on I'm talking, I want to know who I'm directing it to. So good morning. Thank you again. Or actually, I guess it's afternoon where you are, is it not?
It's 3 o'clock our time, yes. And it's very, very hot in London, actually. Yeah.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. Well, again, I appreciate your time. Welcome aboard. So you got the new album coming out soon. And you guys have actually, as I noted, I'm late to the party, but you've been around for a while and you've been very active. Tell me a little bit about the origins of Hogia, to shorten the name.
To start off with, so Mark and I used to make music together when we were at school many years ago. So when we were about 12, we're high school chums, basically. We would, in the music room at lunchtimes and things, jam through stuff, Queen songbook and Brilliant, that kind of thing. And we also did some experimental contemporary classical stuff as well together at that stage. Yeah. And we played in small bands and things. And then I got a bit distracted by becoming a doctor for a while. So I was a neuropathologist, mostly brain cancer. I was, that can get in the way of other activities. It has to be said, it's
slow down your creative process
can be quite
for a few years.
Intense. But also, I've got a genetic collagen disorder, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and over the years I had to keep cutting back the amount of doctoring I was doing. I was sitting at a microscope, and it's very difficult with fractures in my, the bits of bone missing in my back. And so I knew for a long time that I was having to gradually wind down the medical part. And although, it's not a situation I would necessarily have chosen in that sense, on the other hand, it does free me up to do nice creative things without feeling guilty.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I was supposedly, Marcus has been playing in bands all through his life, whereas I had, from school and then wasn't for a long time. And then I took part in a hospital pantomime, and I was playing the highly prestigious role of Sinbad's friend. Not Sinbad, Sinbad's friend. It was definitely a bit below the line. But I was given a couple of songs to do, and nobody came back afterwards and said, you must do more acting. But I did get people saying, oh, you must do more singing. So it gave me a bit of confidence I'd always been doing little bits of songwriting. But
you'd always been a songwriter. Yeah.
So I started with open mic nights, doing little acoustic sessions, then featured artists, acoustic slots, and you build up your craft by experience and getting used to playing in front of an audience. And then Mark came to one of them, and maybe you take them.
Yeah, I mean, I came down and saw Malcolm just sort of hang out and see what he was getting up to. And he got up and he did some covers, but there was some of his original stuff in there as well. And I think at the time I was probably only in about 4 bands because I was always spreading myself a little too thin. But I thought, why don't we see where this can go? Why don't we, because we always played well together at school. We've got a natural affinity with each other musically, and we always know where the other one wants to go, or we can look at each other a certain way, and we both know what we're sort of talking about, So we gave it a go, didn't we? We gave it. Did it start with recording, or did it start with actually doing some gigs? I can't remember.
So I was also doing some stuff with Catherine, who I'm the husband of Catherine, she's a classical flautist, a professional classical musician, and she, though it's not necessarily her genre, she was helping me out to get me started performing. She knew I needed to express myself, otherwise I'd get a bit...
Yeah, get out of the
house. So she helped to going and doing some gigs with me and giving a bit of encouragement and confidence. And I was doing some recording of some of that stuff that I didn't necessarily expect it would go as far as it.
Yeah, album number 7.
Yeah, I was the first album, I was kind of imagining this was purely a vanity project that would only be a bunch of CDs in my cupboard. And it's gone from that to being a vanity project with CDs in several people's cupboards. Great progress. No, I mean, I'm very grateful for all people who do support us.
Project, go all in. What I say.
Oh yeah, all or nothing. Go hard or go home.
So we
all in on the band.
On that first CD, that was I think 11 years ago, and Mark then recorded some bass for some of those tracks, and there was also some involvement. Actually, was really.
I think it might be.
So there was also I'd met some people at jam nights, and that had also helped give me some confidence to do stuff. And they were involved at earlier stages, but they had to. Well, we had a lovely drummer who then had to move, and then we couldn't carry on, and then similarly.
Hats Off was up to a 5-piece at one point in the sort of earlier stages. Yeah, we were a full band with a second guitar player, and Cathy would come on flute as well. So,
but various, people in relation to where people were moving and living, and also in terms of what works for us physically because of my medical things, we generally play as the two of us plus laptop, and we've played our stuff into the laptop before.
Yeah, it's us playing on the laptop, so it's not backing tracks
in that sense.
It's us.
But it's really handy for me that it means we can rehearse in our flat in a way we couldn't with a drum kit in terms of neighbours, and also I can do quite a lot of it lying down, or go from lying down to sitting up and standing in a way that's just much less easy for me if I'm having to pack up gear and go to a rehearsal studio.
And even just doing gigs, because there's only me and him at gigs, and occasionally Catherine, so there's less organisation in terms of trying to get people in a room, or can you make this, or can we travel to so-and-so?
Yeah.
You know, we get on a train literally with 2 suitcases and 2 guitars, and that's the band.
And we know it's an unusual setup for a live performance, but it's an arrangement that means that I can keep performing, basically, and without us having to carry stuff that we just physically can't. So it works for us, and we're quite pleased how it's working out. And as I say, it does mean that if a festival wants to bring us in, we can get on and off stage in 5 minutes.
Oh, yeah,
in a way that if you're setting up a drum kit and a bank of keyboards, not so much. And we're cheaper to put up because we only need a couple of.
A tour manager's dream, they say.
Exactly. Tour manager's dream. Yeah.
And I'm curious, I'm sure the question comes up often, and I've yet to see the origins of it. Other than a potential slogan for my career, where do you come up with the name Hats Off Gentlemen, It's Adequate?
So I always presage this with, I accept it's not practical in many ways. When you put the name on a festival poster, the font has to be so tiny to make it fit on that. Nobody's got any idea who you are. But on the other hand, if people are searching for you online, there's a very good chance that it's not going to be somebody else who comes up with that name. So there are pragmatic benefits. And it's also a kind of sort of English humor, self-deprecating humor, I think. The image, I had an image in my mind for years of Edwardian gentlemen going huzzah about something being fine, but
being very average.
That's okay. Also, I think there may have been a little bit of inspiration from, there's a Philip K. Dick story about where the person who becomes the president is the person who's statistically most average, and there is averageness that is celebrated. And then it's also a playful take on Schumann wrote a review of Chopin when Chopin was starting off, which said, "Hats off, gentlemen, a genius." And it's a kind of playful take on that kind of thing.
Nice.
I've always said though as well, it's quite handy. It doesn't really it doesn't suggest a genre as such.
Yeah.
Got a sort of name that you're led down a path where you know what it's going to sound like before you've even heard a note being played,
Although it might make it sound like it's a comedy band, which is not.
Yeah, which is not.
So we don't take ourselves very seriously. We're quite playful, I hope. And on stage, there's lots of playful interaction with the audience. But the actual music is often what we were describing as bleak-tastic.
Bleak-tastic, yeah.
It tends to focus on fairly
weighty
themes, and rather than being party bangers. So there's a danger people might not listen, thinking, "Oh, it's going to be some kind of novelty act." Right. I did see one review complaining that.
It's just the steampunk.
Oh yeah, they didn't even bother to wear hats.
They weren't even steampunk.
We never claimed to be steampunk. Nothing against steampunk, but it's just somebody must have assumed that from the name. And on a personal level, I don't actually like hats. I don't want to give the impression that
I've never seen you wear one.
No, I'm not saying. I mean, it's not like I'm some kind of Jamiroquai. So that is another way in which the name is potentially misleading. But you're more of a hat wearer than me.
I am. Yes.
Yeah.
Fair enough, but I do like it. It is quite memorable and it's unique, and I think that's the part I really enjoyed, and it stood out for me in that sense. And I'm always curious where people get that stuff from.
Call it hats off from you on in. If you mention it, just call it hats off.
Save time, and we can save you about 20% of your time.
The last guys I interviewed were digging into like Timothy Leary philosophy for their band name, so it was
oh wow, okay,
always fascinating. And that's I think that's the one thing I'm very much used to with prog bands is that frequently I find they increase my vocabulary. You guys have taken it a bit of a step further, because as I read about the album, and just listening to you talk now, there's such a deep love of literature and so many literary references involved in this stuff that not only expanding my vocabulary, you're attempting to expand my reading list, which I will never finish probably, but
I like bands that do that, actually. I really like bands that do that and sort of teach you about other ways of thinking and other avenues you can go down. You know, it's not just music. It's a way of kind of, you know, presenting ideas.
I mean, in terms of when you're saying about literature, I mean, it's basically in real life, I'm quite shy, and I'm not particularly shy on stage, but in real life, well, no, which one's real life? I feel more real actually on this. That feels more genuine. But in kind of day-to-day life, I'm quite shy, and I don't really express emotions very obviously. And it's nice for me that we might take I like having a song where we've taken the viewpoint of a character in a situation, and then particularly on stage, you feel like you're being that character, expressing that thing, and it may be they're expressing things that I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable expressing as me. You know what I mean? Because if I'm, you know, if one of these characters is, say, angry, and that can come across, I think, in the stage performances, but if it was doing it at me, I'd be putting in loads of apologies and caveat in a way that doesn't work dramatically. Yes. It's nice to be able to get into a character in a situation. So that's one of the things I like about literature. Often, a lot of our songs have been science fiction inspired, and some have been history and philosophy and current affairs, politics inspired. And I think there's a link between them in that a lot of science fiction isn't really about the future. It tells you much more about the time in which
it's a reflection on what is happening at the
time. When you look at past science fiction, it's how the future used to be. That kind of sense. So, and sometimes by things being set 100,000 years in the future in a different galaxy, it gives it the space to be able to tackle uncomfortable subjects with some distance. So on this album, it's not a concept album in the sense of telling a story from point A to point B at the end, but it has several interweaving connected themes, some coming from, you're mentioning literature, some coming from a more political aspects, but that then sort of reflect on each other and go on a journey, even though it isn't a single narrative, because that's our intention.
Nice. Yeah, I took some time to look up the stories that were mentioned and were referenced to get an idea of what all was going on. And I mean, you're pulling from the likes of, you know, Philip K. Dick and Ian M. Banks and things like that. But what do you think for you were the themes that stood out the most, that really drew you to these particular stories for this album?
I mean, there are some recurrent themes that we keep coming back to.
So, the last two albums have touched on.
Miscommunication leading to ongoing problems without necessarily it being that either side starts off with bad intentions, perhaps.
Things escalate into a point where you can't remember why you started in the first place.
So cycles of violence, and then the communication breaks down more and more, so it becomes going to be impossible to break out of it. In the Ian M. Banks influence title track, in that story, it's an AI who's then talking to somebody who thinks they're about to commit a terrorist atrocity and showing them the futility of that kind of ongoing thing and changing their mind.
A lot of what we like about it as well is kind of how we as a race, as a human race, don't learn from our previous mistakes, and generation upon generation keeps reliving it over and over again. You know, whether it's climate change or whether it's you know, hatred against one another in some sort of way. You know, So we kind of, the songs are written about that as well.
Yeah.
So without shoving it down people's throats, it's more of a kind of tapping someone on the shoulder and saying, well, look, don't you realise what's going on here?
Yeah.
And trying to sort of lead people to a way of thinking rather than,
We hope it's not too preachy.
Yeah.
And also there is a danger with these things that largely you're preaching to the converted. I mean, I think most people who listen to prog rock tend not to be evil. You know what I mean? I don't think there are going to be many people listening to our stuff and go, oh yeah, I won't go and do a bad thing now. But on the other hand, it's the stuff that's going on all around us, and that's what inspires me for writing lyrics. And it's never particularly appealed to me to write about how baby you look so fine or whatever.
Yeah, it's not really Moon June Spoon your kind of song.
No, but it's just that what I'm influenced by the time, and I listen to lots and lots of audiobooks. Sometimes it's a phrase that just comes out that seems to be calling out to be a shape of a melody.
Yeah.
I was going to in terms of the themes, and we were saying about communication, and also that sense of Mark was raising the issue of othering. When you're saying, well, this is us, those over them, there are them, and them aren't really proper humans. We are humanity, and they are thems, and that's the theme we keep going back to in it. And obviously, from our perspective, that being a bad thing. So one of the songs is in relation to, my family was very affected by the Holocaust, and we've explored that a bit in some previous tracks. In this album, there was a book by a UK Labour MP who wrote about a group of MPs in the Second World War who were gay, and they had been going to Germany, which had, at the time, very liberal laws relating to homosexuality.
The sort of Weimar kind of era Germany.
And then obviously that changed with the rise of the Nazis, and they were some of the first people in UK public life to be aware of the dangers of the impending Holocaust, anti-Semitism, and fascism, and they were then seeing their friends suddenly disappearing into concentration camps. And I found that a really moving book. And also for me, I'm my personal views are left of centre, and I'm not perhaps so used to a story in which a Conservative MP is the actual hero.
Yeah.
And so I quite like that it challenged my assumptions that this was a group of Conservative MPs who started as largely like rich Playboy type figures, but who then were really changed by what they'd seen and stood up against. And the Chamberlain government was threatening to out them, and there were these failed attacks in the British press, and they were called the Glamour Boys. At the time, they couldn't say they were gay, but they were pushing through their contacts in the press to make sure these people were undermined. And they could have just acquiesced, but they didn't. They carried on fighting against fascism. Many of them then lost their lives actually in the war. But so they had political views that, not to start with, that are not ones that I necessarily share. But then they had this experience that I think is
it's a fascinating book, actually, isn't it? It's
story.
Because Malcolm brought it to my attention as well. I didn't even know of the story until Malcolm told me about it, which then made me go and read the book as well, which then opened my eyes to the story and the whole.
So that's one of the stories this one's a historical true story. We've in our version of it, we've made our kind of protagonist figure an amalgam of several of the different.
No one's named by name,
but following their story. But to me, it's a similar kind of narrative to some of the other ones we've done from the science fiction aspect, where people are learning the dangers of regarding people who are different as less valued or less human.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of links that, when I say we have these links between the fictional and the non-fictional, and, as you're saying, literature in a variety of ways feeding into the overall shape of the album.
Right. Yeah. Sounds very cool. In fact, you've got me interested in the book now too. So, the fourth book on my list. But for those listening that we haven't said the title yet, but the new album, The Light of Agent Mistakes, as you can see, the theme's absolutely encapsulated in 5 words, due out September 9th.
Yes.
It's been a whole year since your last album. What's taken you guys so long? How does it feel to get back in the groove?
So long.
Yeah, it's pretty lazy. I mean, to be fair, we did an EP in the middle of that.
We did an EP. We put out an EP during lockdown as well. When was it? Second lockdown we had.
We definitely have done an EP at that time.
Yeah.
Of stuff that's not on the album. And I also knocked out a solo album as well.
Yeah, you did another minimalist classical.
Yeah, I also did classical minimalist stuff as well.
There's never a shortage of I say this fingers crossed, there's never a shortage of song ideas sitting around. There's a little locker we've got, that's kind of got songs sitting there ready to be used for future projects or maybe not, depending. So, I mean, even the next album, there's some ideas already in there floating around. We've got a loose idea of what it might be about. So, yeah, you're writing all the time.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, one of the... so I find it very difficult to just do one thing at a time. So as soon as we have things to do, like proofreading, CD booklets, then my urge, I had this morning, we needed to get the stuff to the printers.
Yeah.
And then suddenly I've got this new song idea and it's like, oh no, I need to be checking for spelling mistakes.
Yeah, as we're doing this interview now, actually, we're literally just sent off the artwork for the album for printing, for printing.
And so then it was another song idea was getting ready. So yeah, I think songwriting is like some form of deferment for a displacement activity when I have things I meant to do. But on the other hand, there is some positives to that in that we then have lots of songs.
Yeah, I think half my role in this band is to keep Malcolm on track.
Yeah, actually, that's a really valuable
thing. Stay on target, Just keep.
So I mean, it goes through cycles of splurging out lots of activity and then tidying things up. But yeah, I think Mark makes a good point. That one of the things I really like about us working as a duo is you might suddenly get a message like, oh, here are 6 new song ideas. What do you like? And then well, I particularly like this one. Okay, I'll focus on that one. And that, I find that feedback and interaction really helpful. And it also encourages me maybe to be a bit more wild with it in a way that if it was just me on my own, I might be like, oh no, I should get rid of that. Oh no, I should make that quieter.
Yeah.
You say, no, come on, that guitar solo needs to be audible and, you can give it a bit more welly in that bit of vocal. That's helpful, yeah.
It's amazing because in over the last 3 years, so many bands, it seems, were slowed down by the pandemic.
I know, yeah.
And yet you guys seem to just kept chugging right along, although it sounds like you maybe have been always chugging along.
Well, that's our working method, because the way we generally work, I mean, Malcolm would send me ideas over via, a Dropbox or whatever, or WeTransfer, and I'll work at them at my place on my computer, and then I'll record all the bits that I think should maybe be on this track, fire them all back to him, and he'll put those bits in or not, depending. So that's the way we generally worked, isn't it? And then we only really get together physically when we're, say, recording vocals, and then obviously the more mixing and sort of those sort of things where you want to sort of bounce around ideas in terms of volume levels and panning and stuff. But yeah, in terms of songs and parts, it's all done remotely with each other.
Yeah. I mean, because of my physical challenges, I have to spend most of the day normally lying down. And so a lot of the time I'm spending it lying down with a laptop on my chest, writing ditties.
Yeah.
Almost.
So that's why there's so many sounds on a Hats Off song half the time. It's because the kitchen sink gets put in there. And then sometimes the kitchen sink will get used, or sometimes it'll just be Malcolm and a piano, depending on what the song needs. So, and that's a decision that we come to between us.
Yeah, we hope the sounds serve the song, but often things are very layered. So, I suppose something like when the Walking to Aldebaran, which is the most complex of the tracks on the new album, and I think I had 90-something of tracks,
separate elements on it.
It's probably not very hopefully without it just being a mush,
a mess,
because we try and with EQ and things carve out individual spaces for things, but often, say if we've got a string part, rather than it being a single string plug-in or instrument, it will be multiple layered ones that it gives it a thickness and also a bit more of a sense of reality. We got, and often it's a mixture of synthesized and sampled and real. So bringing a mixture of humanity and stuff that I can do lying down.
It's amazing the way that technology these days can enable people dealing with physical challenges who might not otherwise be able to be involved in music and creation this way, to be able to be as creative as you are. Like that is one of those modern miracles, because, you go back far enough, this would be almost something, an untapped well of creativity, to use the word again, on your part. That's amazing.
I mean, if this was 20, 30 years ago, if you think, say like Pink Floyd, how much it would cost to make a Pink Floyd album in those days.
I was thinking, the way our working methods and the old system of going to a studio and booking out a studio for a month or 2 months, or whatever, it still wouldn't work that way with us even now, because the songs evolve over an amount of time at varying rates and get finished off at different points.
It's a very iterative process.
Yeah, it really is.
And it goes backwards, forwards between us, and it might end up quite differently to how it.
I could see if we went and booked, I don't know, Abbey Road or Air Studios or whatever, we'd probably sit there and go, right, what should we do? Because that's not the way we work,
Right.
And I'd probably sit there for however long, and then my back would go. And
exactly.
Spend the rest of the time lying down. So it kind of works for us. But as you say, the technology has given me a freedom, and even with the things like I said, what we're doing now, if it had been in the past, no record label would have been wanting to put the money that would have taken to record the kind of things we're doing in that kind of way. But also, we'd have been dependent on reaching out to people just through live gigs that we can tour to. So the limitations there as well.
I mean, how long is the album now?
The album?
Was it an hour? Is it an hour?
It's 67 minutes. That's the kind of thing. Stuff tends to be
trying to sell to an A&R man the idea of a 67-minute album with a 9-minute album about a spaceman who turns into something.
I mean, also all of our albums, I think, would have been double albums if on vinyl, because they're pretty long. So it would have been, commercially not plausible at all. But the fact that actually, to me, it feels quite amazing that we, I can have an idea and it goes into a laptop lying down. And all the editing, mixing, mastering we do on the laptop. And going from that, and then, being heard by people. In
like yourself. Different continents.
I find that really an inspiring thing. I mean, obviously it means that there's loads of music because there are so many fewer barriers to making music.
Right.
But it's transformative for me.
Yeah. It's the idea that these days you can do all that from home on a laptop and have the level of quality, sound quality, and all that comes out of these things without the cost of bringing in Alan Parsons is, to me,
of course,
a great advancement.
Also, then the feedback you get from the end user, the person who's going to listen to it at the other end and appreciate it. So they'll contact you via Facebook or whatever and say how much they love that new song that you've written 3 weeks ago. So that whole connection is so much quicker now than it used to be as well.
Yeah.
And, that's the guys like you as well who are making us known to people out there. So
it certainly does seem your profile has been on the rise, because I know certainly, you came to my attention through other avenues, other prog related magazines and sites and things like that, where they put something up there. Hey, got a great album here. Listen to this, and pull it up and go, oh yeah, you're right. It is a great album. Thank you for sharing that. So that's I have been in a glut of discovery lately. It seems like in the space of 2 weeks, about 24 bands I didn't know existed that are new just have popped up. Some of them are actually brand new and just debuting, but it has been I do enjoy the discovery. That's my favorite part about all of it.
Yeah, there's so much good music out there. There's so much good music.
And we're very fortunate. I think in the UK there's like an independent folk scene of, I'm not saying it's huge in terms of commercially, but there's a group of bands at similar kind of level, often playing the same similar venues and festivals, and really mutually supportive.
Yeah, the scene over here. I mean, I assume it's the same in the States as well, actually, because I think the prog scenes and the metal scenes have always attracted bands that are supportive to each other. But over here, as Matt was saying, the sort of level that we're at. The bands we bump into, they're
really nice.
Yeah, everyone's got each other's backs, and everyone's buying each other's stuff, and the fans as well. The fans over here, they like physical product. They like to buy a T-shirt. They like to buy a physical CD rather than download it.
CDs,
yeah. I used to have CDs, but then storage just became an issue.
Yeah,
so
that's the same for me personally. In our flat, we don't have room for CDs, so I used to be a classical music reviewer.
Right.
And so I had a vast collection, but we just sadly couldn't physically handle it. But people who are fortunate to have the space, I certainly can understand that desire to have something tangible.
Well, that's why we spend a lot of time on the artwork as well. We sit down and we plan the artwork because it will be a physical album.
Right.
And it's very much an integral, for us, the art is an integral part of the album.
Yeah, it's part of the whole experience as well. So you're not just listening to the songs, you're actually, you can read the lyric sheet and there's artwork attached to each song, and the whole thing feels like an entity.
Yeah, for the last couple of albums, we've generally made at least one new artwork to reflect each song.
Nice. Wow, that's impressive. I like that. Yeah, and I worry at times that with all the digital, that the art form of the album cover can get lost. Although I think there are a lot of bands out there doing well, like you guys. I really like the cover for this upcoming album in particular. It has a very classic appeal to it, I think, in terms of the pantheon of album covers. So it is very reflective, and I think reflects the music well, and hints towards a story more than just some real simple abstract thing that somebody else might have.
Yeah, and we aimed with that image because it's made up from multiple different images that we've edited together. That without explicitly being one of the songs, it has got hints towards several different songs of the album in different ways.
Yeah.
When you're saying about the death of, or the risk of the decline of album art as a form, one of the issues that we have faced is there's a real perceptual difference between seeing something at an LP size, just in terms of even like, it's a bit like the difference between seeing something on a television and seeing it in the cinema. In the cinema, you're having to move your eyes to follow the action, which is a very different neurological process to just in front of you. It's more, more passive in terms of your eye movements. Yeah. Similarly, if you've got an album cover that's that big, you're looking and your eyes are darting to different places. That doesn't necessarily mean it will translate the same thing that would work in that space doesn't necessarily translate well to a thumbnail on a phone. Yeah. But realistically,
that's how music's getting consumed.
A lot of the people who are seeing the album cover are going to be seeing it in that kind of thumbnail format. So we tried to make the art in a way that hopefully works in both contexts. We did slightly vary some things for the printed version versus the online version, just in terms of the sharpness and detail there. But yeah, it's a bit of a balance, trying to make it work in both sizes.
Yeah. Speaking as a person who really tends to lock in memory with visual references, that kind of stuff to me is important. And even when it's not present, I've got it in my head, I tend to, for whatever weird reason, if I don't have a visual reference to work with, when I hear certain songs, in some ways I still in my mind associate certain colors with certain musical styles and textures. And I it's the best way I can think to describe it. It's maybe I'm not the only one that has that little weird facet of my brain going on. So, or I am, and somebody needs to study my brain.
Well, often with our albums, there's been a color palette that we've gone with to give some kind of consistency through the album, which hopefully we feel reflects the sound in some way. So we've had songs where it was more of a bluish, slightly colder
silvers and that kind of idea, wasn't it?
And then we had the Nostalgia for Infinity was greys and clouds. Then there were more brighter blues.
There's more like browns and brighter blues and oranges and this sort of thing going on this time around.
So that kind of sense of the mood board for the album varies a bit from album to album.
Nice.
Hopefully it's got consistency.
Meanwhile, so instead of storing CDs these days, I'm working on figuring out where to store the concert shirts. So I've just switched my collection, so to speak. I'm curious. So you did something rather unusual with this album that I don't think I've seen done before, at least not in a single album, that you have an instrumental trilogy within the album. If I understood correctly, The Anxiety Machine, I guess, is the overarching title of it. And I understand for you, Malcolm, there's a very personal aspect associated with those, at least one of those particular songs in the trilogy regarding, I don't know if I'm saying it right, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome?
So that's my genetic collagen disorder that very much influences my life. It causes, it's a genetic disease. Collagen is the most abundant protein in the body, as in pretty much everything. So I have a lot of chronic pain. It causes problems with the autonomic system, so you get brain fog, vomiting, torn cartilages and things in my knees, bits of bone missing in my back, etc., etc. It varies which bit isn't working from moment to moment, but usually there's something that hurts. So there's a song on the album, I'm Tired and Everything Hurts, which was inspired by a T-shirt that I saw and then bought, which just said, I'm tired and everything hurts. And I got in touch with the people who made the T-shirt and said, could I borrow that as a song title? Sure. That was a new stump. But I thought, that as a rough summary reflects quite a lot of my life. So I wrote the lyrics for that song being about the difficulty, again, that coming back to that theme of communication. Often when you meet somebody, they say, oh, hello, how are you? And sometimes it's because they actually want to know, how are you feeling? What's physically going on with you? Usually not. Usually it's just a standard might as well be two computers saying ping, ping, and just checking there's a connection.
This is also a very, very British thing as well.
Yeah. But I think that might be an English-American thing, that in England it'd be, oh, I'm fine, whereas I think maybe more American would be great. I'm great. Not sure. But if you've got a chronic problem, it's very difficult to know what to say. And I've spoken to quite a lot of people with similar issues where you don't want to be dishonest. But you also know that the other person probably doesn't want to go through a list of your top 25 current disability issues at that moment. But you also don't want people to feel uncomfortable talking to you. So I tend to answer with you, well, either
answer a song.
Well, answer a song, or in real life, either was not dead yet, or up down, whatever. Something non-committal.
Define it in the face of massive adversity.
Yeah, and that's where the song that we had a few albums ago, "Broken but still standing." That kind of sense of I'm not saying I'm fine, but I want to carry on. It's really important not to give up. So that's what the song "I'm Tired and Everything Hurts" about. One of the other things that is very common with this condition is jitteriness, anxiety. I don't know how much it's to do with my inherent personality, how much to do with the illness, but I tend to be a bit anxious, and I think that's one of the reasons that I tend to be so productive as well. Because it distracts me from whatever else I might think if I wasn't forcing other stuff into my head.
The anxiety machine, the 3 parts of that's the edited version, isn't it?
Yeah, so there's
a longer version.
Oh, there's so that's just an instrumental, and it's it's fairly abstract, and
that's coming from more of your
contemporary classical side. And it was just I suppose it was just a kind of it was meant to be a bit of a musical description, that kind of it's not,
it's unnerving and a bit edgy, and kind of you're not quite settled. That sort of thing.
I mean, it's not,
we're not trying to freak people out.
It's not like a panic attack type thing.
No.
It's just that I don't know,
something's not quite right.
Which
continual sense of feeling unsettled.
So again, David, sorry?
A continual sense of feeling unsettled, I imagine.
That's it.
So that was sort of what I was getting at with that, and it's just
but it acts as punctuation for
so so there might be I think we can recognise there might be a limit to how long in a row people want me shouting in their face, basically, and instead we'll pause with an anxious instrument. So with the way we try and structure the albums in a way that's
that's also important as well. There's a definite flow to the albums. There's a definite start point and end point, and we try and that's as important as the artwork.
So you might have moments that are quite intense.
The idea of the album,
and then we might have a more not laid back. That's definitely the wrong word, but less in your face.
It's got ebb and flow to it. It comes up to crescendo and comes down again.
I mean, on the whole, we tend to have roughly 50-50, I think, instrumental and non-instrumental tracks in our album.
I think it is half and half this time, pretty much.
Well,
vocal, non-vocal.
It's an interesting choice. I flash back to you talking earlier about how, to a certain extent, telling the story as a character, or the lyrics written through the eyes of a character, can serve almost as a means of personal expression by proxy.
Yes.
And it's interesting that I guess perhaps one of the more personal songs, if not the most personal song or suite of songs in the album, you chose to go with an instrumental route.
That's an interesting point. And actually thinking back on some of our previous albums where the ones that I've done about family history, so we had Refuge, which is about my great-grandmother's experience of it being in hiding during the Holocaust and being protected and saved. And then on the previous one, which was about my great-granddad on the other side, his experience of fighting in the Second World War. But both of those,
they're both long form,
sort of semi-classical, but instrumental. Yeah, so I've not really thought about that before, but that's an interesting point. Yeah. Maybe.
Well, emotion comes across in each of them, doesn't it? I mean, I think so. And the fact you do, obviously, in the liner notes where you explain at this point the story's doing this, and at this point the story's doing that. So it gives the listener a kind of indication of what's going on.
Yeah. Oh, that's I guess one of the great things about music is the ability to express things wordlessly, especially emotion.
It's also nice because of the sort of audience that we've got as well. I mean, the prog audience, they're very much on board with kind of instrumental songs. They'll come with you on a 9-minute wordless journey, I think, whereas maybe some genres wouldn't do that so much. So people are kind of understanding.
I suppose that's also an advantage of we release ourselves on our own nano label. We don't have to persuade someone to let us do like we had on one of the albums, a piece that was just manipulated flute sounds in a pretty I was going to say unpleasant. That's not quite the right word, but it was really
unpredictable.
It was very unsettling. That was representing something not very nice in the story at that point. And yes, that was completely. That was atonal, and it was just sounds. And nobody seemed to mind it. But I could imagine that if there was somebody else had money at risk for these kind of things, they might not be very keen on that. We can. That's nice freedom in our genre, and also with the.
It's very nice when you get to hear feedback from people about what their favourite tracks are, and sometimes they'll pick the one you think, "Wow, that's your favourite." Really, obviously, if it speaks to them, it speaks to them. So that's fine by me.
You never know.
Yeah,
grab somebody really. And I think that's one thing I must express some jealousy for you guys over there, because when I hear you talking about the prog community and the prog festivals and all that, we don't have that much here in the States, to be honest. Those things seem to be flourishing very nicely in the UK and Europe and all that. So, there's some jealousy, and I understand you've got your own gig, which you unknowingly will be celebrating on my birthday in December, Prog the Forest. So
we'll basically ask you.
Prog the Forest. So for several years we've been started off organising ourselves, and now it's a joint production with London Prog Gigs, who are lovely promoters who focus on prog in London. It's a one-day festival with all volunteers from progressive music from a variety of backgrounds. It's quite a broad interpretation of progressive
because we're curating it, so it is a broad.
And it's nice for us. We get to spend the day listening to people that we want to listen to, and it raises funds. All the money goes to it's the World Land Trust, which is a charity that it buys bits of threatened rainforest and other vulnerable habitats and puts it into a legal protected status, working with local communities. For example, if you've got, say, 2 bits of forest and they've got a gap between them, it might be that you've not got enough critical area for a species to survive, for example. But if they can buy a corridor that connects the two, then you can then go to a viable ecosystem. So they seem to quite strategically getting land where it has the most positive impact for biodiversity. And obviously without rainforests, we are a bit screwed in terms of climate change. So
yeah, indeed.
That's what that festival raises for.
Yeah.
I think so. It's about 42
acres.
I think it's 42 acres now. Yeah. We've raised enough for it to be.
Yeah. All the bands give their services for free.
Yeah, it's all volunteers
and
people.
always that's come up in the last few years, isn't it? We've got we're sort of building on that as well, year on year. So
right. So that's what because I know the world doesn't know my birthday. It's December 3rd, right? And at the Fiddler's Elbow in Camden.
Yes. Yep. So that's a nice venue there. I mean, they've been very supportive to us from
day one, really.
We're just starting, and it's lovely to be able to put on what's now become
it's now in the prog calendar.
Nice, excellent. Other things you guys have going on the burners that you're getting ready to be involved in?
Well, we're off to Brighton pretty soon.
We're off to Hove next week or so, next couple of weeks.
Yep.
Play down the seaside.
Yep.
And what gigs we've got?
The Emerald Dawn?
Yes, with a band called the Emerald Dawn, who again, one of those bands we just keep bumping into.
They're lovely, and they're also very supportive of...
They're based down in Cornwall, they're based a long way away, but they're a fantastic band.
And so that's the next one. And then
we've got a launch gig for the album actually coming up later in the year as well. Is that
25th of September, I think?
Yeah, 25th of September at the Camden Club, which is not too far from the Roundhouse, actually, on Chalk Farm Road, the old Roundhouse, which is still going. And we're going to sort of maybe do a couple of sets.
Yeah, so our plan is we're the Wood Demons, who are also people who've joined us in Frog the Forest previously. They're going to be joining us for a set, and then we're going to be doing 2 sets, and it's going to be quite different to our normal stuff in that some of it we've taken where people have asked for things that we've not done before, and also obviously things from the new album, but
which we haven't played yet.
But also some kind of the aim is we'll be playing at least one track from all 7 albums.
Yeah. And there might be a Q&A section as well. We're going to have a little Q&A from the audience, so members can submit questions, and we'll hopefully answer a few in the time as well.
Well, okay. So a lot of things, honestly, in the works. You guys sound like you're keeping very busy, and are you starting to feel that rise in the profile these days? Are you...
like it, actually. I think since the last couple of albums, I think since I
mean, we did for this album, we've not done before a pre-sale thing with people getting a name in the booklet. We had enough space in the booklet for I think 40 or 50 people, and we hoped maybe a couple of people might be interested, but we sold out of those within the first day.
Wow.
Yeah. Having said that, that's probably now that everybody who's ever been interested in hearing the album. So, it's a niche audience, but we're very grateful.
More cupboard space needed for the overflow.
No, so we're really pleased. So for each album, we seem to be getting more people interested in listening to
more reach.
Yeah. Well,
and we're grateful to all we get quite a lot of support from broadcasters around the world.
Yeah, there's so many radio shows and podcasts out there that play our stuff that again, it's a lovely thing to know that someone in Australia has heard your song, or someone in Indonesia has heard your song, or wherever, So.
Yeah. That is the upside of the modern world. Is you can.
That's the upside of the modern world. Yeah, it has got some upsides to it.
Yeah. So and that's the great thing. And again, I love the discovery. The rise in profile for you guys is, from what I'm hearing, absolutely much deserved. It's
thank you very much.
I listened through the last couple of albums. Very much enjoyed them. I've enjoyed what the first 2 singles out. First one's the title track, right? I'm suddenly blanking on it. I didn't have that written in front of me.
So what we have done, if people pre-order the album, they get access to 2 tracks.
That's it.
The Light of Ancient Mistakes and one of the instrumentals. And then we've also had the single Burn the World, which is in aid of the World Land Trust. And then I think there will be,
maybe I'm Tired.
Yeah, so then we're going to put out I'm Tired and Everything Hurts as a kind of, as a single in aid of research into that condition. And then that's probably the only single before then the album comes out in September.
Yeah.
I think I think that's our timeline.
All right. Yeah. What I've heard so far sounds great. Keep it up. I'm sorry. I actually it would have been nice. I'm going to be in the UK, but in Scotland the first 2 weeks of September. As soon as you were talking about, a release gig in September, I went, ooh. And then you said the 20th or 23rd or something like that. And I went, damn it.
We did actually do some gigs in Edinburgh a couple of times actually, they were part gig, part lecture.
Yeah.
Gigs.
So I used to be a medical school teacher, and some of the stuff we've written about has some overlap with my interest in evolution and neuroscience and things. And so we did done a couple of events where it's been a combination of a lecture interspersed with songs that relate to what we've just been talking about, and those have been fun, and I think pretty unusual.
Yeah, unfortunately, COVID got in the way of that. And scuppered that.
We were meant to be going back and do another one, but
let's get back up there at some point.
Well, that's very cool. Well, guys, I really appreciate your time with me today. It was great talking to you.
You too.
Very fascinating to hear the background and how all this stuff relates to your lives. But that's always the part that I find most fascinating with a lot of it anyway, the whole creative process. I wish I had talent so I could get on the other side once in my life. But in the meantime, I just enjoy witnessing those who do have talent and talking to them a bit about what they're doing. So I do appreciate the time.
I very much this we really appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. I wish you tons of success with the album and with all the gigs you got coming up. I hope you kill it with Prog the Forest, and I wish I could be there, but I don't know. Maybe someday I'll be able to be more of a jet setter and get over there a couple times a year instead of just.
Come see us. Go.
Yeah, well, if you're in the UK, get in touch, let us know, and if we've got something going on, we'll get you a backstage pass. Bring you in, yeah.
Excellent. That would be awesome.
Thank
you very much. Take care.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye-bye. I want to say a big thank you once again to Mark Gatland and Malcolm Galloway of Hats Off Gentlemen, It's Adequate for their time and their bravery being part of the inaugural video edition of Bleeding Edge Interviews. Thank you guys very much. It was great talking to you. You're fun. I look forward to hearing more from you. And hey, you know what? Maybe getting to chat with you again in the future. Maybe even someday in person. You never know. Meanwhile, like I said, give me your thoughts in the comments below. Be nice. Constructive criticism is welcome. Keep in mind, this is a work in progress. We'll see where this goes and how it evolves. Maybe there'll be other things down the road. Keep an eye out for some other big stuff I have in the pipeline, including at least 2 additional interviews that will be out very quickly. So hang tight and you'll see what's going to happen. It'll be a fun ride, I hope. Meanwhile, hit a like. It's always nice. Even more importantly, hit subscribe, hit the bell, follow along. Feel free to smack me if I ever say smash the like button. I'm not doing that beyond what I just did now. Anyway, thank you for your time. Thanks for viewing. This is Super Dave, signing off.